So I thought I was cool, I was tough, I was hardcore, and I fell into like edgy, nasty music. MC5 made perfect sense the first time I heard him. Iggy Pop made perfect sense the first time I heard it. I got it. And then all of a sudden, I'm sitting around and someone at somebody's house, we used to just sit around and smoke endless amounts of dope and play records. And, in this smoky, black-lit atmosphere, someone put on Bitches Brew. It just took me to another planet. It was dream music. Rather than tough guy, burn rubber, macho music, it had this kind of charming beauty.
My good friend Herb Reichert is both a poet and a painter, a scholar and a sage. And though those words fall off my tongue with rather dulling alliteration, I can find no better way in a small space of time to describe Herb's many, many talents. Herb is also my colleague at Stereophile magazine. Herb exists in that rare audio writer's universe that includes Art Dudley, Michael Fremer, the late great Wes Phillips, and Jonathan Scull, perhaps the greatest writers in audio of all time. What Herb does so wonderfully in his reviews, beyond describing the sound of a piece of gear or explaining as only he can the technical details of a power amplifier or a DAC or a turntable, Herb is a great storyteller. And please listen here as Herb tells stories about his jazz record collection and records in general and music and art, which also gave me the chance to rumble through his apartment and photograph his art tools and his beautiful artworks on his walls and various tchotchkes and tools and tricks of his trade.
I was so embarrassed when you asked me to do this that I'm like, I don't know anything about jazz. I mean, you got to be able to remember names. When I was 6, my mother would say, Eddie, she called me Eddie, she'd go, your mind is a sieve. You can't even remember my name. She goes, and if you didn't read all the time, your mind would be totally empty when you went to sleep. It's even worse now. And that's partly why I struggle with jazz. You got to remember who's the drummer, who played bass, etc. What label was it on? It's all too complex. But I fell into jazz kind of by accident. I started, my first job ever in the history of Herb was I stocked records at a Chess record outlet. And that's where I learned the beauty of 7-inch 45s. You could, even if it was July and it was 90 degrees, you'd wear a leather jacket and you could just stuff them in the leather jacket and take a 45 home. They never missed it because you're unpacking the boxes. Nobody knew. And that's when I started collecting records. But I fell into blues. It was all Chess records. When I was 12, I'd get to see Howlin' Wolf. You had to be 23 to see Howlin' Wolf, not 12. And they even served you liquor if you wanted it. Nobody asked you. It was that kind of club. Like, who's going to say no? But that really affected my taste. And then I was 17 in 1968, and I'm in San Francisco, and I'm watching like Sly and the Family Stone. So I grew up in that hippie era. And to me, jazz was for old people. It was cocktails and Ames chairs and listening. They had nice stereos. My friend's dad had these nice stereos. And I was like, it looked like something your parents did. And so I wanted everything that was naughty and rebellious and what my parents didn't want. I'm sure I wasn't the only one. But I never fell for the Beatles. I fell for the Stones because they were more naughty and they weren't a girl band, is what I called it. So I rejected the music early on that either my parents or the girls in high school that I thought were not serious liked. So I thought I was cool, I was tough, I was hardcore. All of a sudden, at somebody's house on Bitches Brew, it just took me to another planet. It was dream music. Rather than tough guy, burn rubber, macho music, it had this kind of charming beauty. And at the time, I was trying to figure out what to do in college and stuff. Right after that, I switched from being a physics major to being a painting and theater major. So suddenly I'm hanging out with artists and theater people. And I love artists and theater people. And I started listening to what I guess you guys call fusion. Herbie Hancock, Tony Williams. These guys made sense to me, and they still do. Now I'm like 100 years old, and I'm just beginning to really grasp what that stuff really was. It's more than psychedelic, you know, it's more than fusion. I don't even like the category name fusion. I recently went to this thing called the European Triad Festival in France, and my friend Jeffrey Jackson and Dave Slagle put up this 4-way horn system, and it was this mono, and it was in the corner, and it had horn bass, and horns project the image in front of themselves instead of between the speakers or behind the speakers. A mono horn, Mississippi Fred McDowell was sitting on the horn, bass horn, playing his guitar, and his head was about a foot in front of the mid-range horn. And you're like, wow, there's something tangible and real. And Mississippi Fred was full-sized. You know, in my home stereo, Mississippi Fred might be 4 feet tall, standing between a pair of harvests or something like that. And it's different. And it seemed like there was nothing but just clean, empty air between the microphone and the performer. When I came home, all of a sudden everything sounded like a table radio with a blanket over it. But I listened to 3 albums. I listened to Live Evil by Miles Davis. I listened to a tribute to Jack Johnson by Miles Davis. And I listened to a Mississippi Fred McDowell live album. And it rearranged my chromosomes. It changed my life. I felt like I'd been listening to Miles forever. All of a sudden, there's a point where you can just feel Miles saying, more Herbie, more keyboard. You can just feel it. I mean, it was just subliminal, but you could almost see his gestures. You could see him, kind of manipulating the band just with his mind practice. That doesn't happen in my house. And it doesn't happen with the most, very fancy produced. I also became, I can't pronounce his name. That's why I don't do jazz. Teo Maceo. I mean, all of a sudden, Teo Maceo is a painter. And for me, and I'm going to show you a few albums that I like, but I see everything as painting. I see music as painting. I paint between 2 speakers, and my whole life, I've spent 50 years working on a painting between 2 stereo speakers. And so the music I listen to, I see music as painting. And Teo Maceo was like, he was creating a collage. This is painting. And so the albums I'm going to show you that have caught my attention, Ken asked me, show me some jazz albums you like. You may laugh. And one of the albums was another one we played. When I got into Herbie, I also got into, strangely enough, Sun Ra. Sun Ra really clicked with me. And I've been lucky. I've never, God, if I could see anybody, I would like to see Miles Davis. But I have seen Sun Ra a bunch of times. Been in the right place in the right time to see a few good groups. I had never heard of Moondog. And the people who I hang with who built this horn, they had turned me on to Moondog maybe not that long ago, maybe 8-10 years ago, maybe a little longer than that. Anyhow,